Good evening and welcome to Athens City Council. It's Monday, February 21st at 7 o'clock, and we are in regular session tonight. Our first item of business is establishing a quorum, and all members of council are present. Next item of business is disposition of the minutes for the regular session held February 7th, 2022. If I could have a motion for approval of these minutes.
So moved.
Okay, moved by Councilmember Grace, seconded by Councilmember Ziff. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The motion carries and the minutes have been approved. Next item is communications, and we have received a notice from the Ohio Division of Liquor Control through the Department of Commerce that there is a new liquor license application, a C2 application for Athens Burritos LLC on the first floor of 10 South Court Street here in Athens. And it would be for selling wine and mixed beverages in sealed containers for carryout. And if the council is wanting to make an inquiry about this, the responses must be postmarked by March 7th. And are there communications from other council members? Seeing none, we'll move on to the law director.
No.
Auditor Hecht.
No report.
Mayor Patterson.
No communications.
We'll move on. We have a full agenda tonight. We have some ordinances for third reading. And when we read those for the third time, we do include a brief summary of it and then see if there are any final comments or questions and then move on to the vote. For the ordinances for second reading, we are doing just that. We are reading it for the second time. The title of the ordinance, there is typically not discussion. There is sometimes a suspension, and we do have a suspension of one ordinance tonight, I think, that needs to be completed in time for a grant, authorizing a grant application to the Safe Routes to School program. And then ordinances and resolutions for first reading, there will be some explanation of those as we talk about them for the first time. So ordinances for third reading. 122, this is an ordinance authorizing unneeded or obsolete municipal personal property to be sold by internet auction and is introduced by Councilmember Crowell.
Thank you, President Isley. I'd like to make a motion to approve 0122.
Second.
Thank you, Member Ziff. I'll just go ahead and read the pertinent section here. This ordinance has been discussed at committee and read twice and here on third reading. Section 1, Athens City Council, in accordance with Ohio Revised Code, Section 721.15D, hereby authorizes the Service Safety Director or his designee to enter into an agreement with the Government Auction Service to conduct internet auctions for the selling of unneeded or obsolete municipal personal property, and shall require the bidder to pay all fees, taxes, and surcharges. Auction items will be advertised for no less than 10 days, including Saturdays, Sundays, and legal holidays. Thank you, President Isley.
Okay, thank you. And we have a motion and second for the approval. Any comments or questions from council members, elected officials, or the audience? If none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The motion carries and the ordinance is approved. Ordinance 222 is an ordinance amending Athens City Code Title 17, Municipal Income Tax, Chapter 17.01, in General Section 17.01.012, Purposes of Tax Rate. Introduced by Councilmember Crowell.
Thank you, President Isley. I'd like to make a motion to approve 0222.
Second.
Thank you. I won't go ahead and read this. This is to update our code to have the proper effective tax rate for 2017. We have to do this periodically in order to have the last 5 years of the correct tax rates in the municipal code. So the change here to this to the code is the following. Effective January 1st, 2017, changed from 2016. The tax shall be levied at a rate of 1.85%, and that's a change from 1.65. Thank you, President Isley.
Okay, thank you. We have a motion and second for approval. Are there any final comments or questions from council members, other elected officials, or our audience? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The motion carries and the ordinance is approved. Ordinance 322 is an ordinance authorizing the mayor to execute a housing revolving loan fund administration agreement with the State of Ohio Development Services Agency and declaring an emergency. And this is introduced by Councilmember Crowell.
Thank you, President Nisley. And this is the Housing Revolving Fund Loan Administration Agreement, as mentioned. And this agreement between the Ohio Department of Development and the City of Athens is for the period from January 1st, 22 to December 31st, 2026. So it is a 5-year agreement. And I'd like to make a motion to approve this ordinance.
Second.
Okay. We have a motion and second. Any comments or questions from council members, elected officials? And we do have a comment from the audience. Yes, please. If you could state your name and address for us. And if you represent a group.
Jordan Pazel, 61 Franklin, no group. I just have a question on what this revolving loan fund would actually be for, like within the realm of housing.
And do we have details on that revolving loan fund and the kinds of?
Yes. This is, the Ohio Department of Development administers the federal program called the Community Development Block Grant, CDBG, which you may have heard in front of council before. They also do the Home Investment Partnerships Program. And the city is a, eligible recipient of funds from both of these programs. And we have used these funds to finance certain activities for many, many years. Mayor, could you provide us with some of the uses of this fund?
Yeah, a lot of this is for LMI home improvements, replacing heating and cooling systems. It's been used to repair or replace a roof on qualified applicants' homes here in the city of Athens. And this ordinance is basically giving HAPCAP, the Hocking Athens Perry Community Action Group, the ability to administer this as opposed to the city administering it. We have in the past for many years been the primary administrator, but in communications with Glenn Crippen at HAPCAP, their success at being able to qualify for other funding streams that are similar to this, we felt that it would be good to have HAPCAP manage this particular program for the city of Athens. But the citizens would still apply. They would apply through HAPCAP to get this type of loan to, again, make home improvements.
Got it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. I found the pertinent language I was looking for. The development goals are, 1, improving the affordable housing stock, and 2, providing for the affordable housing needs of low and moderate income persons in designated areas of the Housing Revolving Loan Fund.
Okay.
Thank you, President Nisley.
Thank you. And part of the reason HAPCAP is that, as the mayor said, that agency that provides so many of those wraparound services for our clients in Athens County. So this is it's a good partnership. All right, we have a motion and second then, and if no other questions, we'll have the vote. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The motion carries and the ordinance is approved. Ordinance 422 is an ordinance amending the 2022 Appropriation Ordinance 150-21 and authorizing the auditor to make interfund transfers. This is introduced by Councilmember Crowell.
Thank you, President Nisley. I'd like to make a motion to approve 0422.
Second.
There are a number of appropriations to be updated in the 2022 appropriation ordinance, including $5,000 appropriated to the general fund for the auditor's office for a new printer or copier, $6,000 to the general fund fire for structural repairs to the fire department headquarters, and $150,000 to the tax incremental finance fund for the school share, the Athens City School District share of that tax incremental financing. And then the section 2 of this ordinance includes the transfers between funds, including $50,000 from the general fund to the cemetery fund, $5,000 from the parking garage fund to the general fund, $150,000 from the American Rescue Plan Act fund to the community center fund, $135,600 from the parking garage fund to the parking garage debt fund, and $200,000 from the water fund to the water treatment plant improvement debt fund, water treatment plant improvement debt fund. Thank you, President Isley.
Okay, thank you. We have a motion and second for approval of Ordinance 422. Do we have any questions from council members or elected officials or our audience members? If none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The motion carries and the ordinance is approved. Ordinance 522 is an ordinance authorizing a city fiber network project 347 and is introduced by Councilmember McCary.
Thank you, President Isley. As a reminder, this is a project to help us interconnect our city buildings with fiber in the ground, replacing our outdated point-to-point microwave system. And in section 3, we indicate that the Service Safety Director would hereby be authorized to expend up to $500,000 from American Rescue Plan Act funds for said project. And this project is one that would be taking place over 5 years and 6 different phases for the purpose of improving our internet connectivity. I would like to make a motion to pass this.
Okay. We have a motion. We have a motion and second for approval. Any comments or questions from council members, elected officials, or our audience members? If not, then all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The motion carries and the ordinance is approved. Ordinance 722 is an ordinance authorizing a one-time retention payment for the City of Athens Patrol. 622. And mine does not have it, so I will move right here. Okay. This is an ordinance authorizing the execution of a contract reopener with the Athens City Fraternal Order of Police, Ohio Labor Council, Inc., and the City of Athens patrol officers, lieutenants, and communication officers concerning wages. And this is introduced by the Finance and Personnel Committee.
Thank you, President Isley. I'd like to make a motion to approve 0622.
Second.
As the title of this ordinance explains, and as we've discussed at committee and throughout the first 2 readings of this ordinance, this does authorize a 2.5% wage increase effective with the first full pay period of 2022, and a 2.25% wage increase effective with the first full pay period of 2023 for the Athens patrol officers, lieutenants, and communication officers in accordance with the Fraternal Order of Police, Ohio Labor Council Incorporated. These agreements were adopted on December 21st, 2020. Thank you, President Isley.
Okay. We have a motion and second for approval of ordinance 622. Do we have any further questions or comments from council members, our elected officials, or the audience? Yes, Jordan.
Jordan Pavel, 61 Franklin. I doubt you're going to listen to me on this, since council has seemingly perpetually ignored Athens citizens since at least last year about basically everything regarding police. Do you guys know that the police in Minneapolis just murdered another black man? We really do need care and not cops. Please fund more social services. I think the Athens police are plenty well funded at over $4 million a year, and as has been pointed out in previous budget discussions, are among already the highest paid employees in Athens. I urge you to vote no on this.
Thank you. Any other comments? All right. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The motion carries and the ordinance is approved. Ordinance 722 is an ordinance authorizing a one-time retention payment for the City of Athens patrol officers, lieutenants, and communications officers, and is introduced by the Finance and Personnel Committee.
Thank you, President Nisley. I'd like to make a motion to approve 0722.
Second.
Thank you, Member Spielness. This is part of the contract negotiations with the Athens Police Department Union, the Federal Order of Police. And it's part of the contract negotiations to try to retain the officers that we do have. And Section 1 reads, Athens City Council does hereby authorize a one-time $1,000 retention payment for Athens patrol officers, lieutenants, and communication officers with a clawback provision for any officer who leaves other than for retirement or disability separation during the remainder of the current contract. Thank you, President Leslie.
Okay, thank you. Any comments or questions from council members?
Yes, if I could.
Yes, Councilmember McCary.
Thank you. I just want to acknowledge that this is a controversial topic for many community members who have concerns over how much law enforcement is compensated for their work. And I understand that these negotiations don't all unfold in front of the public, so that this proposed $1,000 one-time retention payment might be significantly less than what may have been requested, and I think providing that kind of context in addition to Councilmember Crowell's comments is important to note.
Thank you. And any other comments? Councilmember Spielness, yes.
Yes, thank you, President Isley. I also want to just mention that there's been a lot of talk about having monies for services. And I just want to say that that's being done. There is efforts and there is a program in place to provide crisis intervention and screening that I think answers a lot of the questions about where money's going, in addition to, police, and that is a developing program. And also, I just want to emphasize that providing sufficient funding for our police means that we get the best quality police officers, and in my experience with the city, they really are. So I just wanted to have that for the record.
Thank you. Any other comments from council members, elected officials, or the public? Yes, Jordan.
Jordan Pavel, 61 Franklin. Member Spielness, I would like to respond to your comment on police funding. The major cities give literal billion, or like tens of millions, even to hundreds of millions of dollars to their police. More funding than some countries have for their militaries, and yet they are still terrorizing their citizens. The LAPD has more funding than I imagine most of Athens for the entire city, and yet they are still terrorizing their citizens.
Okay.
More funding for police isn't going to solve our problems. Please vote no.
Okay, thank you. All right.
We have one more for the audience.
Oh, yes. Mayor Weil. Former Mayor Weil. Former council member Weil.
Mo Wiles, here, Mary.
3 Mary Avenue.
I assume that you're talking about the CIT training, which is still required for most?
No, that is in place, but there's an additional program that has just gotten underway the last couple, sorry, I shouldn't have said that.
No, that's okay. But I know it's hard to hold on to the police. I mean, we're competing against OU police force in the area and other cities, as well as larger cities. So I understand the need to pay them appropriately. I've never had any problem with it. I think they do a pretty good job considering what we have to do with the transient population. And I say transient, I mean students who come in and have an attitude sometimes that we're yokos here or something. Okay, but I think it's necessary sometimes because I've seen them stolen from us, so to speak, police force. And if you want good ones, you're going to have to pay them. Doesn't mean you don't pay them for other services for you, training, et cetera, et cetera.
Thank you. Okay. All right. Go ahead with the vote then. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay.
Nay.
Okay, Councilmember Ziff. One against. And the ordinance is passed. Ordinance 822 is an ordinance authorizing preliminary engineering services for the Uptown Improvements Project number 329. And is introduced by Councilmember Reisner.
Thank you, Madam President. I'd like to make a motion that we adopt 0822.
Second?
I'll just read a little bit of it to remind everyone what this is about. This is a project that's very similar to what has occurred on West Union Street between Court and not Congress. Yeah, Congress. So let me read this. Whereas the city received $1,005,000 in ODOT Transportation Alternative Program TAP funds for construction, and whereas the project limits are West Washington Street between Congress and College and State Street between Congress and College, and whereas the project will review the recommendations in the Active Transportation Plan completed in 2018 and includes improving the safety of the area for bicycles and pedestrians by adding standard amenities, safety items, and completing pavement marking updates and signal improvements. And then the various sections go on to say where the funds are going to be sent to, but it amounts to $160,000 from the Street Rehab Fund 572 for project number 329.
Okay. So we have a motion and second for approval of 822. Are there any other questions or comments? Yes, Councilmember Swank.
Will this require a bid? Okay. Thank you.
Other questions or comments?
President Eisel.
Yes, Mayor
Just a
Patterson.
point of clarification, as you read the second whereas, it states that it's West Washington Street between Congress and College. West should be struck from that because that's actually East and West Washington Street in between College and Congress. But it's an editorial change or just a grammatical change. I don't think that this warrants, unless Clerk of Council feels it needs to be amended back to first
It's
reading
just
again. Okay.
Just a small clerical correction. Thank you.
I think it's correct.
Okay, thank you. Comments? Yes. Paul
Oh, wow,
Weil.
3 Mary Street. You're talking about doing Washington Street. Is that part of the zone that has to be turned into brick again?
You know, one of the things we'll explore on that is West Washington Street that was paved over some years ago. I don't know if that was paved over before or after the Brick Street Preservation Ordinance that was put into place. We did, just a little bit of historical knowledge for anyone watching, when we did do the improvement on West Union in between Congress and Court Street, they did mill it down. When I noticed that it was all brick underneath there, I said, let's rethink this. But when we did mill it, there was so much concrete patchwork that had been done on that particular street that, and extra work that would have to go into that to start, you know, rethinking the curb cuts and all of that in that section. We just went ahead and pressed forward. It would have cost a lot of money, Paul, to sit there and replace, pull out the concrete, and try to find bricks to replace what was down. But we will take a look at West Washington.
Okay, just wondered.
Sure.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments or questions? All right. All those in favor of approving ordinance 822 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The motion carries and the ordinance is approved. 922 is an ordinance authorizing disposal of certain vehicles no longer needed for a municipal purpose and is introduced by Councilmember Reisner.
Thank you, Madam President. This ordinance that was discussed in committee has been read twice before. It's the type of ordinance that we do every year in order to dispose of older vehicles that just simply aren't worth keeping any longer. So I would urge everyone to vote for this, so I will make a motion that we adopt 0922.
We have a second. Okay, we have motion and second. Any other comments or questions from council members, elected officials, or the audience? All right, seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The motion carries and the ordinance is approved. Ordinance 1122 is an ordinance accepting a utility and ingress-egress easement on South Blackburn Road, introduced by Councilmember Grace.
Thank you, President Mosley. I'd like to make a motion we adopt ordinance 1122.
Second.
Thank you. This ordinance is allowing the city to accept a utility and ingress-egress easement on South Blackburn Road from the grantors of the property there, and this will allow the city to maintain a right-of-way for access to a particular city parcel for utility operations, maintenance, and replacement of existing water storage facilities.
Okay. So we had, we're just pausing to make sure we've got the right ordinance number,
Is good work.
but we don't have it in the list
It's,
here.
it had to be amended, so it's a.
Well, that's right.
on
It was
second read.
Yeah, it
Second
fell in
reading.
second reading.
Right.
I would
So it is late.
gladly have people second check right
Yes.
now to make sure we're right on track.
Yes.
So we have made a motion and second for ordinance 1122. And are there any comments or questions on this ordinance from council members, elected officials, or the audience? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The motion carries and the ordinance is approved. Ordinance 1222 is an ordinance accepting a perpetual easement to construct and maintain a sewer in the name and for the use of the city of Athens, introduced by Councilmember Grace.
Thank you, President Isley. I'd like to make a motion that we adopt ordinance 1222.
Second.
Thank you. This ordinance is doing pretty much exactly what the title says. It's allowing the city to accept a perpetual easement from Marietta Area Healthcare, and this will allow the city to maintain the sewer line at the location of the new Marietta Memorial Facility.
Okay, we have a motion and second for approval of ordinance 1222. Any comments or questions from council members, elected officials, or the audience? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The motion carries and the ordinance is approved. Ordinance 1322 is an ordinance authorizing the Service Safety Director to execute an intra-county mutual aid agreement between the City of Athens and the Athens County Sheriff's Office. This is introduced by Councilmember McCary.
Thank you, President Isley. I would like to make a motion to adopt ordinance 1322.
Second.
Thank you. This is a mutual aid agreement that's not at all uncommon, beneficial to situations, especially when additional person power is requested by whichever senior on-duty officers are in charge of law enforcement agencies that are involved. I can point out the only item I can think that didn't really come up in discussion previously is that this is only in effect to the extent that in the judgment of senior on-duty officers in charge of the law enforcement agency receiving the request, such a request would not impede the proper protection of the receiving agency's own territory. So I am in favor of supporting this mutual aid agreement.
Okay. So we have a motion and second for approval of 1322. Any other comments or questions from council members, elected officials, or the audience? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The motion carries and the ordinance is approved. Ordinance 1422 is an ordinance authorizing the purchase of softening salt for the water treatment plant and is introduced by Councilmember McCary.
Thank you. I would like to make a motion to adopt ordinance 1422.
Second.
Terrific. This one is straightforward and has been reviewed. We're on our third reading now, coming out of our City and Safety Services Committee. And some of us in this room have toured our water treatment plants, know how important it is to make sure that they are equipped to keep our water clean and safe.
Thank you. Motion and second for approval of this. Any other comments or questions from council members, other elected officials, or our audience members? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The motion carries. The ordinance is approved. Ordinance 1522 is an ordinance authorizing the Service Safety Director to enter into contract for a new restroom facility at the West State Street Park. This is project number 349, introduced by Councilmember McCary.
Thank you, President Nisley. I would like to make a motion to adopt Ordinance 1522.
Second.
Thank you. This has come up in City and Safety Services. We're on the third reading. I am most excited about the quality intended for this restroom facility, including the family restrooms and the desire to make this a durable structure that can withstand the elements, vandalism, and anything else we need it to.
Okay. We have a motion and second for approval of 1522. Any other comments or questions from council members, other elected officials, or our audience? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The motion carries, and the ordinance is approved. 1622 is an ordinance authorizing the Service Safety Director to enter into a contract with Business Systems Solutions, Inc., known as BSSI, for Information Technology Network Management Services, and is introduced by Councilmember McCary.
Thank you. I'd like to make a motion to adopt Ordinance 1622.
Second.
Thank you. Okay. All right. All right. So we are in many ways trying to keep up with current trends. In this case, it's decentralizing some of our technological operations in partnership with a firm, BSSI, that we have had council members have the opportunity to speak with. I appreciate those who've taken time to look thoroughly at contracts and seek neutral parties' input. This is something that our City and Safety Services Director is especially strongly in support of, and I would like to encourage folks to pass this.
So we have a motion and second for approval of 1622. Any comments or questions from council members? Yes, Councilmember Swank.
Quick question, the length of this contract is 1 year?
1 year.
Okay, great, thank you.
Yes, and thank you for thank you for asking that. It is also something that we are able to reverse, although unlikely, if need be.
Okay. Any other questions or comments from council members, elected officials, or the audience? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The motion carries and the ordinance is approved. 1722 is an ordinance amending Ordinance 8421 to increase the authorized expenditure for structural repairs to the Athens Fire Department headquarters. This is project number 343 and is introduced by Councilmember McCary.
Thank you, President Nisley. I would like to make a motion that we adopt Ordinance 1722.
Second.
Thank you. I appreciate that folks realize how important it is that we have safe fire safety facilities, and we did find some additional structural repair needs in the midst of trying to do all we can to keep our current headquarters standing up as long as we can. So this is a very important piece to pass for the safety of those who work for our fire department, and I hope folks will support this.
Okay, we have a motion and second for approval of 1722. Any questions or comments?
Comment.
Yes, Councilmember Swarisner.
I just want to remind everybody, when we use the word headquarters, it's not just a place where the fire chief has an office. It's a functioning fire station where we keep the heaviest of our fire equipment, like the ladder truck and the pumper trucks that weigh several thousand pounds, and consequently are causing the building to fail. So these repairs are absolutely necessary, and we absolutely need a new station. So
Thank
that's all I
you.
want to say.
Thank you, Councilmember Reisner.
Okay, any other comments or questions from other elected officials or the audience? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The motion carries and the ordinance is approved. 1822 is an ordinance authorizing construction design for a new Athens Fire Department headquarters, project number 346, introduced by Councilmember McCary.
Thank you. I'd like to make a motion to adopt ordinance 1822.
Second.
I appreciate the enthusiasm on this one, as it is immediate follow-up to the previous ordinance discussed. Not only are we trying to make repairs to keep what we've got standing as long as possible, but we know we just need an entirely new fire station. This has been on the books for some time, and if we could make it magically appear tomorrow, we would, but I would hope that we can adopt this so it can happen as soon as possible.
Okay, we have a motion and second for approval. Any other comments or questions from council members, other elected officials, or the audience? If not, oh yes, Councilmember Ziff.
Thank you, President. I actually just had one question, actually, for administration. And I remember we had talked about an additional sort of like open house, town hall sort of style meeting about the fire station because there was one last month at the community center, and I heard there was going to be another one in March. Was there a confirmed date for that yet?
Not that I have heard.
Okay, just checking. Thank you.
All right, thank you. So there will be time for additional public comment. Yes. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The motion carries and the ordinance is approved. We'll now move on to ordinances for second reading. And ordinance 1022, there it is now, is an ordinance granting a special right-of-way use permit to Paul Richard, owner DBA Good Works, 100 Central Avenue, to construct an accessible parking space. This is introduced by Councilmember Grace.
Just one comment. We amended this last week to remove the name. It was said permit holder, Good Works, Inc.
Oh,
owner.
right. So that should still be out. It should be out of this title. Got
Yes.
it. Good Works owner. Got it. Okay. And do we have any, and I'll just check to see if we have any other questions or comments from other council members, other elected officials, audience members. Paul Weil.
Law through Mary Street. I'm a little bit concerned that we're giving away public right-of-way for this type of system. It's a new built building. They've already have 3 variances. They went through zoning board of appeals, I assume, for that. 2 of them, of course, had setback issues, which I understand on a corner lot. That can be a problem. On the other hand, the other one was a variance for lot coverage, 30% versus 36, so they went up to 36. Now they don't have room for parking. So we're going to use public right-of-way for this. So I'm a little bit concerned about how this is going down. I understand it's a good cause, et cetera, but the fact is I look down the road and say, this is a parking space, and I should have planned better on this, especially if they're going to go over coverage. On another note, I noticed, looking at it and walking around, almost doing a Joe Sligo, there's 2 electric meters on this thing. 2 electric meters usually imply that it's a duplex. This is an R1 zone. 25 years ago, the citizens in that area downzoned it from R2 to R1. I'm hoping it's not going to need another variance for that. In theory, as an R1, it requires 3 unrelated people, no more. Thank you.
Thanks for the comments. So we can follow up with code office to check, to make sure that things are in compliance. Yep. Yes, Rob Delac.
Rob Delac, Morris Avenue here in the city, speaking for myself. Yeah, I serve in the BZA, and it did come before us. This did come before us a couple times for variances, but honestly, if you build and try and replace any building in the city, especially the near neighborhoods like the west side and near east side, you cannot rebuild a house legally according to our code, our zoning code, because it restricts the ability to replace the house I'm in right now. Probably would not fit on the property based on coverage or setbacks, assuredly. And most houses are like that. So exceptions for those things are commonplace, partly because we increased our lot size, minimum lot size, and then changed those dimensions. Most of our lots are below the standard lot size now. And so we're going to have this problem repeatedly because our code is essentially written badly. So I think that's my partial explanation for why this project has some variances. But I do think it seemed reasonable to me as a citizen here, not speaking from Board of Zoning Appeals necessarily, but as a citizen from my observations. They were reasonable requests, I think, so.
Okay. Thanks for the additional perspective and also the perspective on our zoning code that maybe needs some review to take a look at that. Okay. All right, we will move on then. That's been read for the second time. We'll now move on to Ordinance 1922. This is an ordinance authorizing all actions necessary to accept the Northeast Ohio Public Energy Council, known as NOPEC, 2022 Energize Community Grants Funds, introduced by Councilmember Crowell. And if no comments or questions, we will move on to the next ordinance, 2022. This is an ordinance amending the 2022 Appropriation Ordinance 15021 and authorizing the auditor to make interfund transfers. And this is introduced by Councilmember Crowell. If no comments or questions, we'll now move on to Ordinance 2122. This is an ordinance amending the 2022 staffing levels and pay grades, authorized by Ordinance 14121, and is introduced by Councilmember Crowell. And if no comments or questions, we'll now move on to Ordinance 2222. This is an ordinance authorizing the Service Safety Director to close streets in the uptown area for special events during the 2022 calendar year and to change requested dates or cancel events as necessary, and introduced by Councilmember Reisner. If no comments or questions, we'll next move on to Ordinance 2322. This is an ordinance suspending the enforcement of Athens City Code Title 13, General Offenses, Chapter 13.04, Offenses Against Public Peace, Section 13.04.1, Unnecessary Noise in a Designated Area, introduced by Councilmember Reisner. And if no comments or questions, we will now move on to 2422. This is an ordinance suspending the enforcement of Athens City Code, Chapter 11.04, vending, peddling, and soliciting to allow vending in a designated area. This is introduced by Councilmember Reisner. And seeing no questions or comments, we will now move on to 2522. This is an ordinance amending Athens City Code Title III, Administrative Provisions, Unlawful Discriminatory Practices, and is introduced by Councilmember McCary. If no comments or questions, yes, Councilmember Swank.
2 weeks ago at our last regularly scheduled meeting, when we discussed this ordinance, there were a couple of areas at least that the law director, I believe, according to my notes, was going to look into. One had to do with process, particularly the complaint process, and the second had to do with sanctions and penalties. And I was just wondering if we have an update on that, perhaps.
We do, thank you. Member McCary and I were discussing this, and we actually went through each section of unlawful discriminatory practices in the Community Relations Commission. And if you look at 3.07.66H of the City Code, that states the Community Relations Commission shall receive concerns or complaints from citizens, facilitate informal discussions of the issues with involved and affected parties, and then make referrals for mediation or investigation as appropriate, consider community education as a response to the issues presented. That second section, make referrals for mediation or investigation as appropriate. Investigation would be by the Athens City Police. And I did discuss that with our police chief last week. And so as far as process, if there was a complaint, then the complaint would go, unlawful discriminatory practice would go to the Community Relations Commission. They could refer this complaint to mediation or to the police department for further investigation. If the police find probable cause to believe that an offense occurred under this section, then the police could file the charge. The charge is a minor misdemeanor, and I'll get to that in just a moment, would be referred to the Athens City Prosecutor's Office, my office, for prosecution. So if you look at 30769, it talks about other legal action, but looking at 30799 is the penalty. So the penalty is any person, firm, or corporation violating any provision of this section or any amendments or supplements thereto shall be guilty of a minor misdemeanor, and upon conviction shall be fined not more than $150, and each and every day which discrimination continues shall be deemed a separate offense. So the police would investigate. If they find probable cause, they would file a criminal charge. Since this is a criminal charge, then for a conviction of the minor misdemeanor, there would have to be proof beyond a reasonable doubt. So it would be treated no differently than any other criminal case. There would have to be evidence presented in court. This would go to Athens County Municipal Court, and evidence to prove the case beyond a reasonable doubt would be required before there was a conviction. There's another section here, 30769, that talks about other legal action, and it states that nothing in this section of the code shall prevent any person from exercising any right or seeking any remedy to which he or she might otherwise be entitled, or from filing any complaint with any other agency or court of law for equity. So that means that an individual could file a civil action also if there were a violation. So I hope I've explained that, but I did look at this with Member McCary, and perhaps he has something else to add.
Thank you so much. I do want to express appreciation for the work that our law director has done to help clarify what this process looks like. It is not new for the Athens Community Relations Commission to field discriminatory complaints. However, this particular ordinance is updating our understanding of racial discrimination as being inclusive of discrimination based on hair, style, and texture. However, in looking back through the minutes and notes from our Athens Community Relations Commission, this isn't something that they have processed on many occasions, which I think reflects the awareness challenge that we'll have to address through education. Personally, I feel very moved by reports of experiences of many colleagues and citizens who have expressed that they have been discriminated against, but haven't been aware of all of their recourse, and a lawsuit can seem very intimidating. I'm appreciative that this is a citizen-based commission that can, as the law director indicated, refer to either mediation or potential investigation by police, which could lead to prosecution. But I'm really grateful that this doesn't preclude, a civil suit that might more accurately reflect the kind of impact that someone might experience under this circumstance. I'd also just add that President Nisley and I were able to speak to the Athens Community Relations Commission Chair John's meeting just this morning to confirm the understanding that this is a responsibility of the commission and that the educational piece will be an important component. I'm also recognizing that this would extend to Ohio University. I think that was a question at one point, that this discrimination wouldn't be allowed anywhere in Athens. Such that I do believe it will be important to be in dialogue with Ohio University's Office of Equity and Civil Rights Compliance, where currently Ohio University students, staff, faculty would likely take such a complaint without necessarily knowing that they have these additional avenues and resources. So I appreciate the willingness and the service of our Athens Community Relations Commission and all those who've been working on this.
I just had one thing to add, and Member McCary and I were discussing this, but to understand this, this is the portion of the Athens City Code, and this applies to things that happen in the city, not something that happens outside the city limits, but it would have to be something that happens in the city of Athens.
Councilmember Crowell.
Just a point of clarification, I know we often talk about the university property being state of Ohio property and not city of Athens property. So can you explain that to me, Law Director?
Well, that's interesting. There are things in our city code that do apply to Ohio University property. For instance, our city income tax, that definitely applies to Ohio University property because we tax the employees, and so this would be something that would apply also to Ohio University property. A lot of times Ohio University will have, well, since they're state property, the state code applies, and maybe where we have disorderly conduct, the police wouldn't cite under the city code because the state code would allow for that. But in this situation, the city code would apply.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Yes.
I'll just add that I do understand that that was even confusing for me. I think another example was housing code, and that the university doesn't have to follow the city's housing code. So I was pleased to hear, though, that this does extend and cover Ohio University.
Okay.
There are state code regulations that they have to follow for housing.
Any other questions or comments? Council members, other elected officials, or our audience members? All right, if not, that will be read, that's now been read for the second time. Ordinance 2622 is an ordinance amending Athens City Code, Section 9.11.10, face coverings in public spaces, and declaring this ordinance an emergency measure to extend through May 31st, 2022. This is introduced by Councilmember Grace.
Thank you, President Isley. Yeah, we're on second read, but I am going to open this up and talk about this a little bit. And 2 years ago, if anyone had asked me how much research I was going to be doing on transmission rates and mask wearing and effectiveness and policies and recommendations, I would never have guessed anywhere close. I've been doing a lot of reading and research and talking to a lot of individuals and hearing from a lot of individuals concerning our local mask ordinance. And some people are very much ready for this ordinance to, or the mask mandate to end, and would like for it to end as was previously scheduled at the end of February. Others absolutely want it extended. So I've tried to find the balance. I understand being tired of a mask requirement, tired of wearing a mask. I absolutely understand the weariness that some of our businesses, business owners and employees feel if they are dealing with unpleasant, confrontational customers or potential customers who don't want to follow the mask mandate. And I also understand the frustration of individuals who go to places where it is not being enforced, and therefore those individuals feel that their health is not being protected as well. And we still have a fairly low county-wide vaccination rate. Fewer than 50%, or just under 50% of our population has been vaccinated. I guess the term used to be fully vaccinated, but sort of adding to the ongoing changes and unpredictability of COVID, we really need to have a higher percentage of individuals not just vaccinated twice, but having a booster. This most recent variant has shown that it has the ability to get past our initial vaccination, and we have an even lower percentage of our population that has received a booster shot. I believe that fewer than 26% of Athens County residents have received a booster dose. So my purpose with bringing up that information is that we have a lot of vulnerable individuals still in our community. There are a lot of families that have children under 5 years old who don't have the option of vaccination. And we have community members who have different health vulnerabilities that are immunocompromised or immunosuppressed for different reasons. And we still have a fairly high case rate. according to data from today, the case rate in Athens is 371.97 per 100,000. So that's the information that the CDC uses to determine whether mask wearing should continue in indoor locations. And the current CDC guidance is that there should be a case rate of 49 cases per 100,000 people. And just to repeat, we're at 371.97. So even though our numbers are declining, and that's great, the numbers are going down, we're still not in the clear, and we still have vulnerable individuals in our community. And we also have a positivity rate of 9.77, and the CDC recommends that a positivity rate of less than 8 in order to move down to the next level of transmissibility for the community, which would then reduce the need for masking. So in light of the current still relatively high transmission rate and positivity rate, but also looking at data that is showing our numbers are declining, and also recognizing that spring is coming, we are going to have more opportunities for better airflow, circulation, and more outdoor time that I think also improves. I would like to offer an amendment to this ordinance that will change the effective date to keep a mask mandate in place through the end of March, so to March 31st, 2022. And the only other thing I want to highlight as part of discussion before I make that an official motion is I've received some comments about, well, no one else anywhere around us is requiring masks. Other places aren't doing it. Other cities are dropping theirs. Why should we do it? And my point, the statement I made when I first introduced a mask mandate early on was, yeah, they're uncomfortable. Yeah, my glasses fog up when I go from outside in the cold to inside. But if it saves any lives, it's worth it. And so I looked at CDC data on deaths per 100,000 population. So adjusting for population size and looking at Athens County and all the counties around us, Athens has a per capita death rate from COVID of 178.69. Of all the counties surrounding Athens, the next lowest is 307.86. It's 1.7 times higher. 1.7 times more people per capita dying in the counties around us. Some of the surrounding counties have a 400 people per 100,000 population have died of COVID. And I know that the mask mandate that we have in Athens has certainly not been the only factor that has contributed to this difference, but I truly believe it is part of it. And so I want to thank everyone who has respected the health and well-being of their neighbors and of the vulnerable people around them and has continued to wear masks, and thank the businesses and encourage everyone to bear with it a little while longer, because I really believe that it has made a difference, and I think the numbers show that. So those are the points I wanted to make this evening, and
So
I
you're
would make a
making
motion that we amend the ordinance to change the effective date to be through March 31st, 2022.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and second for amending 2622 to changing it from May 31st to a March 31st extension. And so I'll open it up for any comments or questions. Councilmember McCary.
Thank you, President Isley. I just want to express appreciation for this amendment and support for it. just building on Councilmember Grace's comments, I do recognize that what makes Athens largely distinct is the university presence and the students who are about to be headed out on spring break, let alone faculty, staff who are going to be traveling likely to places where masks aren't being enforced. And I believe that giving us some time to see the impact of that once folks return to Athens is wise.
Okay, thank you. Other comments? Yes, Councilmember Spielness, and then we'll come up to Councilmember Swain.
Okay. Thank you very much, President Isley, and for the other comments, Member Grace and McCary. I agree with the March change, but I would like to add to that a little bit. I too have done a lot of reading about this. I have put it on Facebook for local Facebook to ask people on the west side and other groups what they think. We've gotten comments from the Chamber of Commerce and for, other groups. And in my neighborhood, I've asked people. So I also talked to Gillian Ice, the point person and global health director at OU, who has been leading the work to try to minimize the effect of COVID, to try to get her perspective. And so I think it's important to note that we really should be coordinating with the university. I think Member McCrary sort of alluded to that. But I think it's important to note that they are in transition in trying to get their policy. They haven't gotten it nailed down yet, but they're trying to get their policy set so that it is a transition from full masking everywhere to kind of gradually get to first letting people in the dorms not wear masks if cases are diminishing, and then finally in the classroom. So it's going to be a graduated thing, as I understand it, or that's the discussion at this point. In any case, I want to make sure that we are coordinating with them, and I think the spring break issue is very important. I also want to make very clear that there is a certain segment of the population that is hearing misinformation, disinformation about the effectiveness of masks. I have entered information and emails have come to council with clear scientific evidence showing that masks work. And anyone who says otherwise is just being misinformed. So I want to be absolutely clear that that's in the record and that we are not giving license to people to say, don't wear masks, no big deal. No, it really is a big deal. As Member Grace indicated, it does affect people's health, and there are scientific studies showing that we have entered into in the record. So we also received an email from 16 health professionals who have asked that it be extended. So we've gotten, again, people on both sides. We also have a new Omicron variant that may be more dangerous and maybe more contagious. That is, as you've heard in Hong Kong, is having a terrible problem with COVID. Their hospitals are full and it's a nightmare. And we want to see if maybe that's going to be an issue too. So I think by the end of March, we probably should have a pretty good idea of that. Let's see, a couple other points I wanted to make. I did ask Chief Pyle, this is the other side of the story though, I did ask Chief Pyle for the complaint calls about complaints about not wearing masks. And since the beginning of 2022, we've had 5 complaints and there's been no citations. In all of 2021, there were 65 in all complaints, about 5 per month with no citations. And the goal has always been, according to Chief Pyle, that we wanted to encourage people to wear masks and to offer non-compliant people masks. So, and he estimates that approximately 40% of people in the stores are not wearing masks, or are wearing masks, excuse me. So I think one of the concerns is it's really not being enforced, but on the other hand, there are some businesses who feel that it's important to have it on the record so that they can, because it's their preference to keep their employees and clients and customers safe, that having that as a record is positive. So, pardon me for extending this, but I have another point I'd like to make. While I'd like to end the mask mandate at the end of March, I also propose that in the meantime, we look at the potential for creating a new mask mandate that would be driven by triggers in terms of ICU capacity and rates, so that if the local hospitals have a capacity of hardly anything left, and obviously this would have to be determined, that we would say, okay, now the mask mandate is going to automatically, or in some easy way, I don't know how it's done, I'm still new yet, be in force again. And when it's not, it goes back to not being enforced. So I think that having a trigger mechanism, and I think there are organizations that do this sort of thing for emergency information. So if we track the data and create this kind of emergency sort of, it works if we're in trouble, I think that will help. And I've gotten some support from people I've talked to that are kind of experts in this area, that this kind of ordinance could be a good way to override or change what we currently have. So anyway, that's
All
my
right.
piece. Thank you.
Councilmember Swank.
Really not much to add to that. I had actually come here this evening with the science that Member Reisner encouraged us all to do to make that exact same amendment. Now that we kick this back to first reading, and we only have one more meeting in the month, would it be appropriate to go ahead and suspend the rules this evening to get this passed, because we're going to have to suspend them next week, even if it's a special meeting? And secondly, so that we can give the citizens of Athens notice now, not on the very last day of the existing mask ordinance, that this will extend until March 31st, that we can give a clear message. Communication is very, very important, and it seems to me that would be the logical way to do it.
I'd like to, I hear where you're
Councilmember
coming from.
Spielness, and I do think we have discussed, there is the possibility for having a special session.
But we'll still
And I
have to
think that
suspend the rules.
We will have to suspend the rules, but that does give one more ordinance, it gives one more week to obtain comment from the public and also to let the public know. And I think that could be a viable way of alerting people also. But let's hear the other comments. Council members, I want to check to make sure other council members now get a chance to respond. So we've had from Councilmember Spielness and Swank, others. Anybody else wants to make a comment before we return? Councilmember Crowell.
Thank you. I appreciate all the comments by council members. In terms of Member Swank's recommendation, in thinking about this prior to the meeting starting tonight, I did think it was important to give the citizenry a week to provide additional feedback on the change in the date that Member Grace has proposed for the amendment tonight. Member Swank makes a good point about not having this change on the very last date. However, I don't think that all of the signs that are up in businesses, and I also not so sure how close the citizens of Athens pay close attention to what we do up here. So I think it's more the signs that are out, and I don't think they will disappear. So I'm comfortable, for one, having a special session next week and giving the citizenry a week to talk about the amendment tonight instead of jumping through and doing it tonight. But that's just one opinion. Thank you.
And I'll tell you what, let's do. What we have on the floor right now is an amendment to change the end date. And we're having the discussion on that. So if we can see if there are any other comments amongst council members, and then we will move to other elected officials in the audience as well. Councilmember Grace.
Thank you, President Isley. Just to respond to a couple of things that have been said, I did speak at length today with Dr. Gaskell from our health department, and he acknowledged that, of course, many cities and states across the country are dropping their mask orders, but said that the data right now doesn't really support that. The caseloads, what we're seeing and currently still in terms of transmission, does not support an immediate end. And he also did bring up the next variant, Omicron 2, as mentioned by Member Spielness. And his belief is that in the next 2 weeks, we should have seen enough data across the U.S. to sort of see what what this is going to do. And I will put out there that if we suddenly start seeing a huge spike in hospitalizations or cases, that I'm going to be right back here saying, hope March 31st isn't going to cut it, folks. We have a new variant that is putting our community at risk, and we need to keep going longer. So I do want to be open about that and say that there's another variant that has to be watched for a little bit. And I have certainly thought about the possibility of changing from, rather than a set date, changing to a set of parameters. But just as we're discussing whether or not the public would have enough notice when we pass this ordinance, for the public to be informed of when the hospitalization rate drops below a set mark, or when the case rate drops below a set mark. And so for anyone to know when masks are required and when masks are not required, it would get really complicated. And it would be difficult to educate people about what the current status is my concern with that type of a proposal. So that's why I've stuck with proposing a calendar date.
Thank you. Okay. Councilmember Spielness.
Thank you, President Nisley. I guess my comment would be that I think it's worth a discussion about doing it the way I was suggesting. But regarding the issue right now, we could always, my thought was that we could pass the ordinance as is and then repeal it when we want to, so we wouldn't have to go through the special session thing. I don't know. You know, I'm not the procedural expert yet, so I'm just throwing it out there as a suggestion that we could pass it as is, and then when we've decided we want to do something else, we can repeal it and change it to a slightly different
By
model or
introducing
whatever.
another ordinance.
It's just a thought.
And a thought for discussion at another committee meeting. So
Okay.
thank you
Okay.
for making that suggestion. Okay, any other comments from council members? If not, we'll move on to other elected officials. And if not that, then we will move on to audience members. Yes, Jordan.
Jordan Faithful, 61 Franklin. I guess I'm a bit curious why why it's necessary to amend it to March 31st rather than May 31st when, I think the caseloads often track with the, presence of students. If we have fewer people in the area, we have fewer people to get infected. And so I think I'm wondering why we would want to shorten it rather than just set it for, a bit past the end of the school year, when I think there will be just less transmission in general because of having, thousands of fewer people here. I personally think it would make more sense to just keep it at the current date, and then let's say, just in case there's the variant of concern becomes an issue, or if we and it could just be repealed if it turns out, hey, COVID's no longer a huge problem here, and it is below the scientifically recommended levels of transmission for that to be safe.
Okay, thank you. Do you want to respond, or do you want me to?
I can respond to that very briefly, and I've spoken to a lot of people and said, we could go either way. We could leave it with the May 31st end date, and then if, come the end of March, we're down below the CDC standards, or the CDC updates their recommendation, which they're saying they're going to, then we could come back and say, hey, we're ending this early, or we could end it March 31st, and then if Omicron 2 gets really out of control before it ends, we'd extend it again. So we can go both ways. The reason I brought the amendment tonight is because so many people who have reached out to me have expressed being weary with trying to enforce in their spaces of business, and feeling that they need some sort of hope and end in sight type of a message, and because our numbers are declining very quickly right now. The trend has been very good for probably 6 weeks now of a fairly rapid decline. And so that's why, but I've really gone back and forth both ways because it's we can extend for different lengths of time, and who knows when we'll need to be back to discuss it again. The other thing Dr. Gaskell said is the only thing that has been really predictable about this pandemic is the unpredictability, and so it has been a challenge. But I'm trying to reflect that we are hearing the concerns from everyone.
Okay, thank you. I think we've had lots of comments, lots of discussion, and I am thinking
Was there
that
a
it's
second?
time. Yes, there was.
Okay.
And so we have the motion and second for amending this ordinance to take it through March 31st rather than May 31st. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay?
Nay.
Okay. The motion carries with one dissent. So that amendment passes. It's been read for the first time, and as mentioned, we will move towards a special session next Monday night so that this can be read and passed, or voted on, excuse me. We'll now move on to ordinances for first reading. Oh, excuse me, yes. Yes.
In terms of special session, just for the audience information, is that before or after the committee meetings next week?
I'm not sure.
I don't even.
Quite frankly, we'll see.
Oh, there's no procedure as to which way it goes?
No, I don't think it's set either way. We've done it both way,
Okay.
either way. And so we'll have discussions this week, and we will let people know.
Okay.
And we'll have it published on our agenda to make sure we have people know. Yeah. And what's slightly different about a special session, just for point of matter, is that it is just that, and it's only for the purpose of reading the ordinances, so we don't have the usual communications, reports, other businesses, and things like that. It's just the reading of those ordinances. And then we'll have the committee meetings also. We'll move on to ordinances for first reading, and this is Ordinance 2722, an ordinance authorizing the Service Safety Director to submit an application and enter into contract with the Ohio Department of Transportation, ODOT, for safe routes to school funds and declaring an emergency, and is introduced by Councilmember Reisner.
Thank you, Madam President. I'd like to make a motion that we suspend the rules for 2722.
And-
The reason for the suspension is that there's a deadline date that has to be met in order to apply for these grants, and if we don't suspend tonight, we will not have time.
Okay. We have a motion and second requesting a suspension of the rules. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The rules have been suspended. Councilmember Reisner.
As you've already read the title, it's pretty self-explanatory. The various sections just give the Service Safety Director the authority to prepare and execute an application, and if approved, enter into a contract with the Ohio Department of Transportation for Safe Route to Schools SRTS funds. This is something the city has pursued several times in the past, at least about as long as I've been on council. It's been very successful. I think it's something we can really pat ourselves on the back for the way we've executed it and getting the funding and providing exactly what it says, safe routes to schools for children in order to safely walk to school. So having said that, I would like to make a motion that we adopt 2722.
Second.
Second from Councilmember Crowell. Okay. We have a motion and second for approval. Any other comments or questions? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries and the ordinance is approved. 2822 is an ordinance authorizing participation in the Ohio Department of Transportation's Cooperative Purchasing Program, and this is introduced by Councilmember Reisner.
Thank you, Madam President. This is an ordinance for first reading that we have done in the past. This is a way that the city can obtain good prices for necessary equipment and chemicals. In this case, we're mainly talking about road salt. which I think everybody here is familiar with, is that nice white powder that's left on your car after the snow's all gone, which, believe me, it's not intentional from the city, but it does do wonders at getting the ice off the streets. So I could read through the various sections, but I don't really think that's necessary. It's on everyone's drive. So when this comes up for a vote, I highly recommend that we adopt it.
Okay. Councilmember Crowell?
Just one point, in section 7, clerical, I think we'll have to change the date from 2021 to 2022.
Thank you. So noted.
We'll just use our Wayback Machine.
All right. And now we'll move on to ordinance, if no other comments or questions, we will move on to ordinance 2922. This is an ordinance authorizing design, services, and construction of tennis and pickleball courts. It's project number 350, introduced by Councilmember McCary.
Thank you, President Isley. Yes, this came through our City and Safety Services Committee, and I would like to make a motion to adopt ordinance 2922.
Oh, we're just going to read
Oh, sorry,
the first one.
wrong reading.
That's okay.
Scratch that.
We were on a roll there.
It's the first time. Okay. So we did speak about this at committee, but the idea is to continue to improve our recreational facilities whenever possible. So we would like to get some new tennis and pickleball courts, and this is a authorization for our city's service safety director to advertise and accept bids where necessary and enter into contract with the lowest and best bidder for design services for said tennis and pickleball courts. This would be at a total cost of $250,000.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Yes, Councilmember Swank, then Councilmember Spielness.
This was a topic of great discussion Thursday night at the Arts, Parks, and Recreation Advisory Board meeting. And several questions come out of that. The $250,000, is that for design services and construction, or just construction?
Thank you for that question, Councilmember Swank. That is a question that I asked Director Stone and confirmed that this is for both design and construction, so that would be the total cost.
Okay, so that said, $250,000 will not be enough money to complete the project that we looked at last week that showed 3 tennis courts and 4 pickleball courts. This is a project that's been in the works for about 18 months, and the prior recreation director talked to various companies to get estimates of what the project would be, and they all came in the neighborhood of $275,000 to $280,000 just for the construction part. Now, we all know what has happened in terms of supply chain dynamics, material costs, and all of that. And I'm afraid if we are to pass this at $250,000, we're going to have to do one of two things: either scale the project back considerably, or come back to council and ask for considerably more money. That said, before we get this too far down the road, I think we really need to get a handle on what that figure should be. In talking to 2 Ohio tennis firms today, describing what we're going to do, they said we better be at least at $300,000 if we hope to do a project like we talked about last week, in which the Rec Advisory Board has been talking about doing. It just seems to me something difficult to sell to the public when we're talking about spending $250,000 on recreation and then coming back to the public and asking for another $50,000 more, which we will have to do if we want to do the project as it's currently designed.
Okay, thank you for the comments. Councilmember Spielness.
I think I'll pass after that. I think you covered it.
Okay. Any other comments or questions?
So I guess the question would, excuse me.
So, okay, and so you've made the comment, and the question would be what happens procedurally next?
Yes, if as a council felt we needed to either gather more information to have a more accurate figure, to delay moving this on, what are the options, Madam President?
Well, I'd say administration has about a week to, or 2 weeks.
We do.
We do have a special session, so you have a week. to get us some information. And
That's fine.
We could hold on this one if you need to.
Yeah, that's
if
fine
you
with
don't
me.
have
The other
other
option that
information.
council has is to table it in which to get the information and provide it to council as we move forward, but
And if you have the.
We'll get to work
If you
getting
have the
some numbers.
information, and then if we do need to amend, or if you're going to scale it back, then we'll know how to proceed. So by next week.
Whatever's the cleanest is fine.
Okay, thanks. Yes, Auditor Hecht, yes.
Well, I was just going to comment that because until we have our design services done, we won't know exactly what it's going to cost. We often, for big projects, do the design separately, and I think we have an ordinance that's gone through here just for design. But because this is combined, we really aren't going to know. And because this combines both of those, we should probably move forward. That's my opinion. And
then-
amend later if we need to.
And then amend later, like we do some special street projects
We
and
often
things
have
like
to do that.
Yeah.
And it could happen whether we bounce that up to 300,000 or not, with the changes in costs and everything else. But, because this includes the design, I mean, who's gonna say, yeah, it's gonna be 300,000 if we don't have an actual design firm telling us that?
Okay.
That's my opinion.
Okay, thank you.
I guess
Yes, Councilmember
President,
Spielness, yes.
Well, I guess, honestly, when I read this, I thought, it seemed to me, anyway, kind of odd to lump those together. That was my first thought, is, as long as we're down this road. It seems as though design, in my experience, is done first, and then, once that's done, because if it's done by the same group, it seems like they'd have a reason to want it, I don't know. It just seemed odd to me, so I just need to comment on that.
So maybe we direct a question back to Auditor Hecht. I know sometimes we do have projects where it's design and construction. And so are you saying in this particular instance, I mean, is there a recommendation from you to perhaps, we don't have to settle this tonight, but that's
Right.
one option, is to separate this out and to amend it?
Just my
So that it's
opinions
only
from
design.
experience, and the fact is, we do have a highly qualified engineer working for the city who comes up with most of these estimates to begin with, to give us an idea of what we're going to be working with. But we could separate it, but I'm not sure that that's necessary if you want to move it along.
Okay.
And just
I'm going
drag
to
it
make one
out.
more comment, and then because we have some other meaty topics tonight, I'm going to move this on for administration to take care of it this week. They can come back with a recommendation. So Councilmember Swain.
Unless I'm mistaken, we've already hired the design firm, and I know for a fact, the first meeting has already taken place this past Friday. One of the terms we're talking about here is something called design build, where the firm does the whole thing, the design and build. The other is design, and perhaps some totally different firm does the building. But we have, if I'm not mistaken, council passed a $30,000 or $35,000 ordinance last session to hire a design firm right here in Athens, not our own people, but a design firm down on East State Street. And there was a meeting held on Friday to begin designing these tennis courts.
Okay. So we're partway down that road. We will,
Well,
yes,
to
Mayor
that point,
Patterson.
that design firm will likely tell us, okay, here's what it's gonna cost to build this thing. And so I will find out whether there's an update on that for council or not, and
Okay, and then we can make a decision,
Where to go
we
from
can make a
there.
decision on whether to table or not, or amend. Okay, thank you. Thanks for the discussion. Ordinance 3022 is an ordinance amending Athens City Code Title 9, General Regulations, Chapter 9.02, Fire Prevention, Section 9.02.01, Code Adopted, introduced by Councilmember McCary.
Thank you, President Nisley. This was reviewed in City and Safety Services Committee's most recent meeting, and it is important that we are in compliance and having adopted the most current Ohio Fire Code, the Ohio Administrative Rules, and this is lengthy and highly accessible. If you were to just even Google search 1301 fire code and find that this covers all kinds of safety issues and is very important.
All right, thank you. So what we're doing is adopting language to keep it so that it's current. It's a general reference to that section of code so that we won't have a date of 1990. Okay, I'm striking that. Thank you. Any other questions or comments? All right, we'll move on to 3122. This is an ordinance granting a special use permit to Marietta Memorial Healthcare, Inc., 206 Columbus Road, to allow parking and a monument sign in the city's right-of-way. Introduced by Councilmember Grace.
Thank you, President Nicely. And yes, this ordinance does exactly what the title says. It is granting a permit to Marietta Memorial to allow them to have parking and their sign on the city's right-of-way, which we know on Columbus Road, that right-of-way is very wide. And we discussed this in committee last week, I believe.
Okay, all right, thank you. Any other questions or comments? If not, we'll move on to ordinance 3222, an ordinance authorizing the mayor to extend the agreement with Sunday Creek Horizons, a consulting firm, to continue work on a remote work system for the city of Athens, introduced by Councilmember Grace.
Thank you, President Nicely. And yes, we discussed in committee last week the option of continuing our partnership with Sunday Creek Horizons and getting that process started with first read. It allows for that contract to continue, for the mayor to extend that agreement and to expend up to an additional $45,000 from the American Recovery Act Fund for this extension. And just as a reminder, a representative from Sunday Creek Horizons will be coming to us next week in committee to give us details about the work that they have done thus far and their plans for this extension should council grant it.
Okay, thank you. Any comments or questions? All right, we'll move on to 3322. This is an ordinance amending Athens City Code Title 33, Shade Tree Commission, Section 33.01.01, Commission Membership, introduced by Councilmember Grace.
Thank you, President Nicely. And this is a very straightforward language correction to clarify the number of members, that it consists of 7 members that includes 2 alternates, and also removing the gender-specific language that is unnecessary in paragraph B.
Okay, thank you. If no comments or questions, we will move on to 3422. This is an ordinance amending the 2022 appropriation ordinance 15021 and authorizing the auditor to make interfund transfers, and is introduced by Councilmember Crowell.
Thank you, President Isley. This ordinance is to reflect some money that the city has received from the Federal Emergency Management Agency. We receive FEMA monies to pay ourselves back for work that we need to do when a natural disaster occurs, and we can apply for these funds in order to pay for some of that work. We have received a payment in the sum of $749,483, and we will be increasing the total appropriations by that amount, and then transferring that total amount into specific funds within the city that originally paid for the work that needed to be done when those disasters occurred. So approximately $7,767 will be going from this grant fund into the general fund. $332,216 will be going from this grant into the street fund. $1,275 will be going from this grant into the water fund. And $408,222 will be going from this grant into the sewer fund. Thank you, President Nisley.
Thank you. Any questions or comments? All right, none from council members or other elected officials or audience. We will now move on to a 1 reading resolution. This is R122, a resolution to appropriate 2 parcels of real property in fee simple by warranty deed, and to appropriate real property for a temporary right-of-way easement for a highway project identified as the Athens West Union Street, pursuant to Ohio Revised Code 719.04 and Revised Code 719.05 and Revised Code 163. Is introduced by all members of council. And Councilmember Crowell, I believe you will lead off on this.
Yes, this resolution is a one reading resolution as required by the Ohio Revised Code. And it is a resolution concerning eminent domain. And all council members and city officials who I've spoken with about this resolution and about the concept of eminent domain understand and have taken this very, very seriously. This is one of the more difficult actions that I have been involved with personally on city council. Eminent domain is the ability to take private property from a property owner for a public use. And I don't, my support for this resolution doesn't come lightly or not without a lot of sort of consideration and research. I've talked to a number of citizens in detail about this, and I understand concerns, and I am coming to this resolution and my support for it really feeling that it is necessary for the safety and welfare of the entire community. This eminent domain, these parcels are part of the Union Street Improvements Project, and specifically an access road from Union Street along Herald Avenue over to West State Street, where we have a very large, the city's largest recreation facility. If those recreation lands weren't on West State Street, then I'm not sure I would feel the same way about this project, nor would I think many citizens of Athens. Reading all of the comments received from citizens in the city on this project at the open houses in 2020, they are overwhelmingly in support of this access road. Those of us who grew up playing baseball down on the West State Street back in those days, the J.C. Fields, if you remember back that far, now the West State Street Park, or coached their children playing soccer down there, or been a regular at the dog park, know that additional access for this area really benefits the entire community. One commenter said that they were down at the ball fields when the derecho came in 2012, and everybody was massively trying to get out of that area. And these kinds of safety concerns are real concerns. So I do feel that the necessity for this cut through, attaching or connecting these two large city arteries is necessary, and will improve the safety of all of the people who use the area at the end of West State Street. And I want to note that there are currently, we have the dog park and we have city softball and baseball fields. But if anybody has taken a peek at our soccer fields along the Hocking River by Walmart in the past week, you couldn't see them because they were underwater. And that water is now receded, and you can go check out the amount of debris which is now all over that area. So there is, the Arts, Parks, and Recreation Department has been exploring better utilizing the west side, the West State Street Park. Soccer was once played down there, and they are looking at many possibilities of returning soccer to the area. We do have had a parking there's a lot of parking issues, but some of those have been improved with the recent expansion of parking lots. And then there are ongoing discussions with other property owners in that area about how to better use a lot of the open fields that are down there. What this means is that there's going to be more people down there, and specifically more children. So the safety for the area is my top concern, and I do believe that this connector road will make that a safer area. And I do believe that first responder services will be able to access the west side more easily. So, after all this consideration and talking with the director of Engineering and Public Works Department and the mayor and the service safety director and council members, I thought, okay, so what are the routes that this cut through are proposed for this cut through? Well, one is Herald Avenue, which is right by Larry's Doghouse, and shooting it straight over to West State Street. That's one route, and then another route kind of winds back to the owner's property that is being proposed for eminent domain taking. The straight shot puts you out right at the first baseball field as you enter the park on your right. That's not an ideal place to create an intersection because of the activities that will be going on there and the number of children in the area. It also would be a straight shot, and we all know that people who tend to speed will do so more readily on a very straight road than on a curving road. But mostly it's because of where that road would access the park. It sort of would create another dangerous intersection in a heavily congested area where the proposed route to the private property that needs to be taken under this eminent domain action curves, is more of a curving road. It's not taking anybody's house. It is taking an open lot next to the homeowner who owns the lot's house. And I don't, this has been difficult for me to support this this taking, but I do, and it enters West State Street about 200 yards from where those baseball fields start. So it's at a much safer place in terms of the number of children, number of parents and others who will be specifically accessing the baseball field area of the park. So I am in support of this resolution. I will go ahead and read parts of this because I do feel it's very important and should be read into the record and people should hear it today. Whereas it is necessary for the public convenience and welfare to acquire 2 parcels of real property, parcel 19 WD1, which is a part of parent parcel OL 882, in fee simple by warranty deed, more particularly described in the attached Exhibit A and parcel 19 WD2 in fee simple by warranty deed, more particularly described in the attached Exhibit A, both for a highway project identified as ATHW West Union Street with reservation of access in the city of Athens, Athens County, Ohio. And then I'm going to jump down a whereas to whereas the fair market value of the property and the rights, title, interests, and estates therein, and the structures, if any, situated thereon, to be appropriated for a temporary right-of-way easement and for fee simple title by warranty deed in 2 parcels has been determined to be $64,310 as described in the attached Exhibit A. And whereas the parties have been unable to agree on a conveyance or on the terms of a conveyance for any reason, the city of Athens must exercise eminent domain and appropriate the temporary easement and fee simple title by warranty deed of 2 parcels of real property needed for the highway project identified as ATHW West W Union Street. So basically, this resolution resolves that the Athens City Council finds it necessary to appropriate this property, the rights, title, interests, and estates therein, as described in the above and in the attachment. Section 4 of this points out that all deliberations resulting in the passage of this resolution were conducted in open meetings of council, and all deliberations of council that resulted in such action were in meetings open to the public, in compliance with all legal requirements, including section 121.22 of the Ohio Revised Code. And I'll just finish up here by section 6. The mayor of the city of Athens shall immediately, upon passage of this resolution, cause written notice to be given to the owner of, person in possession of, or person having an interest of record in every piece of property sought to be appropriated, or to the authorized agent served by a person designated for the purpose, and return made in the manner provided for the service and return of summons in a civil action. Thank you, President Isaac.
So we do have a motion to approve Resolution 122. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. I'll open it up for discussion first amongst the council members. Any comments or questions? Councilmember Spielness and then Swank.
Okay. This is really uncomfortable, as you said, and it's never been done actually in Athens before. So I'm concerned that the message I'm getting from some people is that they feel as though that this has been sort of not getting enough public reaction to this issue, but as you pointed out, there have been public meetings about this, and we have published that this was going to be done. And it's been going on for 3 years. And also, there was a question about why was this a one read only, and that is specified clearly in the law. So we didn't cut any corners or do anything shady. It's just the way the law reads.
And we're a statutory city and we're abiding by Ohio Revised Code.
Exactly. Thank you for pointing that out. But in the concerns that people have, I wanted to, and thank you for the comments about why this is important, but I would like to ask the mayor if you could please add to what's already been said about the value of this and why we should be voting for it.
Sure. And Member Crowell has already mentioned several of them. Back in February 16th of 2017, we had the 16-inch water main break that occurred down in that area. Fortunately, it didn't occur in the intersection of, say, Central Avenue and West State Street. Had it would have orphaned a lot of people in the apartment complexes as well as the homes down there. So safety is a big issue that we see down there. We have a lot more athletics taking place in West State Street Park, and if EMS needs to get there quickly, they traditionally are coming via Schaefer Avenue from West Union and then looping back around and heading into the park. This would change that in terms of response times to get to that area. It would also affect response times for EMS and for police if they're in the southwest quadrant of the city. We have a brand new EMS station that's out there on 56, and that EMS station now will be able to get up into that area much more quickly as well. The Herald Avenue is an area where we see the potential for economic development to occur along the just north of Larry's Doghouse up in that area, so this opens that up. It'll also, to some degree, balance out the traffic flow that runs through that particular part of the city, the west side and along the West Union corridor. We've got Athens Public Transit that has their garage down in that area where they have to go all the way up to Schaefer if they're going to be turning in different directions, as well as coming back in. They've got basically one way in, one way out once you get beyond Central Avenue. The same holds true for the service garage, and a lot of traffic that currently is going to be going up State Street or Schaefer. This allows them to access West Union. and balance traffic flow out as well. And, you know, again, we're seeing the growth of sports in that area, so there's going to be, continue to see a large volume of vehicles, and at this point, the only way to get in there is, again, going to be from Schaefer, from West State Street, east of Schaefer. You know, everyone's funneling in to get to West State Street Park, you know, using that. This would offset a lot of that traffic flow to where the other option is to come strictly off of West Union.
Thank you.
Thank you, President. Thank you.
All right, and Councilmember Swank.
Mr. Thompson, would it be possible to get that aerial up on the screens when you get a chance, please? Last week when this was first brought up, the Google map, I'm sorry. Last week when this was brought up, I told a story, which I will not repeat, but a story of a young lady who almost died down there. And through the timely and prepared work of an Ohio University student, she was revived. And what that triggered in my mind was some of the things we've talked about tonight: safety, getting vehicles into that area so something could happen, something positive could happen in a negative situation. In other words, there's one way in and there's one way out. Well, I got some calls this week, and it dawned on me, there are quite a few neighborhoods in this city that are one way in and one way out. Mr. Reisner, your neighborhood.
No kidding.
Solveig, your neighborhood. Briarwood, Norwood. Are we going to put access roads into all of these one-way in neighborhoods? I don't think so. I'm going to vote no on this. And I'm going to vote no for a variety of reasons. You mentioned the term access road. Is this an access road, or is this really a city street? I think it's a city street. And to show you where we're going to cram this city street, there's a house where that wall is right there, and there's a house where that wall is right there, and we're going to put a city street in between those two houses. Think about that a moment. Young couple, children playing in the yard, and I'm driving down the street, and they're 15 feet away. Are we going to put up huge fences to protect this? I don't think so. There are three options for bringing this road in if we have to bring it in. One is Blue Line Drive. One is Blick Avenue. And one is Herald Avenue. If we brought it in Blue Line Drive, which back in 1999, the citizens felt was the best way in. We talk about citizen input. This hasn't been going on for 3 years. This has been going on for 23 years. And in a post article, which one of your forebears may have written, it was made very clear that not only was Blue Line Drive a bad way, all of these were bad ways. I was hoping we could get a map up here so I could show you what we're talking about. But there's some real problems. Problem number one, every Saturday in April, May, June, and 2 weekends in August, and every Wednesday, 52 weeks a year. And that problem is Herald Avenue and Larry's Doghouse. Our city safety director sat here last week and told us that is a concern. That is a concern. And I don't care how you design it and how many left-hand turn lanes you put in, it's not going to be a safe location. It's going to be a cut through. If I'm at White's Mill and I want to go to Columbus Road, how am I going to go? I'm going to go down Union Street, I'm going to cut through Herald Avenue, I'm going to get up to Central, make a left on Central, get to 2nd Avenue, drive up past the auditor's house, and I'm on Columbus Road. And one of the reasons I might do that, there are people who hate roundabouts. And we're about to put in another roundabout at the corner of Union and Schaefer. We're not going to do that? Fantastic. We've already got the Barbie roundabout about 100 yards up. We don't need Ken to match. Glad to hear that. A lot of people are very, very, very happy about that. First responders. Other than EMS, the majority of our first responders are coming from uptown, both the sheriff and the police, straight down West State Street, or from the fire department on Richland Avenue or the existing fire department. They wouldn't use this. They wouldn't use this. And then we mentioned an exit point for our big trucks and things from the garage down there. Again, those big trucks filled with salt and everything else driving out between these two houses. I wish we could put the map up there so you could see this, how much we're jamming this in to a neighborhood. We often talk about, well, the people wanted this and the people wanted that. Yes, the people who know what's going on in this town. We're down to one paper, one day a week, the Athens News, a printed paper. Unfortunately, we don't have the Post anymore printed. And the Messenger, what, 3 days a week? Most people don't know this. What I propose tonight is that we lay this on the table until we can have a public meeting which can be advertised so we can get true, timely citizen input on whether the city should go ahead with acquiring someone's property. So I'll defer to the President Council as to what motion or how I need to phrase that to present that to Council.
I think you have one of several options. Right now, you have a motion and a second on the table, and I think the only way that it is before us, and that it would only be if the person who made the motion and seconded it agreed to remove that and accept a motion to table. The other option, which I don't think is going to happen, but I should speak for the people who made the motion and seconded. The other option then is we have the motion on the floor, we have a motion and second, you vote it down, and then you can and then you could make a new vote to table. Would that be correct for Roberts?
I think it's a better
Option.
route to go if the persons who
Remove
had
their-
made the motion
Okay.
would withdraw and
Okay.
Then a motion to table.
Got it, okay. So the question then is to council members Crowell and Grace, who made the motion and second, if they're willing to withdraw the motion and second in consideration of a motion to table. Councilmember Crowell.
Thank you, President Isley. There were about 4 to 5 dozen citizens who commented on the project when the city first started to work on this a number of years ago. So a fair amount of input, I would say. Vast majority was in support of having better access, a connector road into West State Street. One of the points brought up was that this second route, or the route being proposed here with the eminent domain taking, did not change the embankment there, where there's the old railroad bed, the berm that goes through there that is a flood retardant, a levee of sorts to keep the water from the Hocking River on the other side of of the West State Street Park from reaching Union Street. Going straight on I believe Blue Line Drive or Blick or Herald would open up that levee space and allow potential floodwaters to come through, where this route proposed in this resolution would not make a grade change for the existing flood elevations. So that's something else to consider. I think there's been a lot of input. Member Swank, I wish that everybody paid attention to City Council and read their newspapers. Whether it's the printed copy of the Post I picked up on my way up the stairs here today, or our other newspapers and the radio, etc. I'm not sure what is going to change But I'm always open for more conversation and more consideration. So I will remove my motion.
Councilmember Grace, you remove the second.
Could I ask a question of the mayor first?
Sure.
I likely will if, however, I have attended multiple public meetings where this project was discussed with our city planner present, an opportunity for public input. These were happening well before COVID, so there was not any barriers to people finding out about this proposed project and plan. And so I want to say I believe that there have been, over the years, numerous opportunities for public input. But my question to the mayor is, how many different engineers and experts in public transportation and safety have looked at the possible routes and possible plans for this project before coming to the point where we are now? If I have not ever been asked to consider an eminent domain, and we've done a lot of projects in Athens. So it's not something that is taken lightly or acted on quickly. So I believe that there's likely been a lot of consideration, a lot of thought and analysis given before coming to the point of asking council for this action. Would you like to comment on that? You don't have to give a set number, but just my feeling is that it's likely been looked at very carefully.
I can certainly give you the minimum number, and that would be 5. It would be the former city engineer or director for engineering and public works who had both a PE and a PS. Certainly our service safety director has a PE. The assistant engineer for engineering and public works has her PE. The current director of engineering and public works is a 40-year veteran engineer with ODOT, who we were fortunate enough to hire on in the city of Athens. And believe it or not, our director for development and code enforcement, David Riggs, he too has his PE. But then it has certainly been looked at by the engineers on the design team. So I can't give you a firm number as to how many eyes on there have been for this project in terms of designing, planning and designing to make sure that we can get this through. I'd also like to comment briefly just on the funding for this particular project that comes from ODOT by and large, but also ARC, the Appalachian Regional Commission. And that's not an easy task to get that revenue. $400,000 is what we got from ARC. You know, if we don't deliver on a job with this, we really stand to seriously get overlooked on future projects. One of the things that the city of Athens prides itself on is that we deliver on ODOT projects. We've been very successful, but you know, if there is non-delivery and not the ability to sell this project, we do stand the risk of having to give that money back to ODOT or to ARC, in which case that again reflects badly on future projects, that they will certainly remember that the city of Athens wasn't able to deliver on a project here. So that's a long-winded answer to your question, but in terms of design engineering, and I remember well the public forum that occurred down at the Innovation Center. So not only was there one, it was one that was strategically placed in an area where people who lived near where that project was going to take place had easier access to be able to attend that public hearing or forum. We may have had several. It's been so long ago, I don't remember exactly how many we had, but certainly remember the meeting that was hosted down there at the Innovation Center.
So, Councilmember Grace, are you willing to remove the second?
That's a procedural question. if the motion has been withdrawn, but I don't, like,
I think there might be another motion then. My understanding from hearing what some of the council members were saying, maybe there's going to be perhaps a motion to table then. I don't know.
Mr.
Sylvan.
Mayor, on
I'm sorry.
the timing of, under what timeframe do we need to operate to move this project forward and not risk losing that funding?
As I was told by the service safety director just earlier today, is that we have until, I believe, mid-March to let the project. Soon.
I'm just, like, if the motion's already withdrawn, I don't know.
Well,
Do I have to
You're withdrawing your second?
The seconder needs to withdraw. I think both parties need to withdraw the motion. If you're going to. I mean, that's your decision.
I prefer that the vote move forward. I think there has been ample time for review of the options, of the safety. This has been discussed in numerous public forums in the past, and I think that the citizen input in those public gatherings was largely in favor of an alternate route. And given that, and then given the expertise of the engineers to develop the best route, it's my position that we should move forward with the recommendation. So I don't know what happens if I don't withdraw my second, now that the motion has been withdrawn.
This is difficult, but I think that Member Crowell perhaps will have something to say about that
Yes,
then.
Councilmember Crowell.
Well, a couple of points. One, if we vote on this resolution and it fails, I believe that's the end of the process. I'm remembering something that Director Stone said in response to a question a couple of weeks ago, and I don't know if he had the legal authority to state that unequivocally.
He was answering my question about that.
He was answering your question about that.
The resolution isn't appropriating the property. The resolution is a resolution to authorize a court action, which is then a petition in Athens County Common Pleas Court to take the property by eminent domain. Now, we also would ask to immediately be able to go on the property, and when the petition's filed, the amount here has to be deposited with the court, with the clerk of courts. So the only question, I think Mr. Stone explained this, is the only question then in the court action is the amount of compensation. So what you're doing here with the resolution is authorizing a petition to be filed in Common Pleas Court.
And so if it failed, then what would be incumbent on the city administration would be, if you are not allowed that, or because the vote just goes down, then you would need to find another route.
Assuming you could.
Yes, Councilmember Crowell.
Thank you. So we could go back to the recording and see what I actually said. Basically, what I was trying to say was that, more dialogue, more citizen input is always a good thing. And as I tried to say from the very beginning, and I think Member Spielness also, is that this eminent domain, this is the most serious thing I think I've been a part of in terms of sitting on city council. So I don't take it lightly. But to go back to what my initial comments, I think the due diligence has been done. I think that the studies have been done, and all of the alternate routes that Member Swank was listing have been looked at. And for all the reasons, and I didn't talk about the flood elevations reasoning as well in my initial comments, but that is what, yet again, another of the reasons of why this proposed route has been chosen by all the engineers who have looked at the project. I think the additional conversation that we've had here tonight, if this is still a procedural, allowance,
You're going to reinstate your,
is enough for me to stay with supporting, as I said from the very beginning, this ordinance tonight and seeing where it comes out in the vote.
Okay, thank you. So we've had the comments here. I'm going to entertain a comment from the mayor. Then I know we have several members who have waited 2 hours to make a comment. We're going to give you 3 minutes. I'm going to time it. But I do want to make sure that everybody gets an opportunity to comment tonight. So Mayor Patterson, and then we'll open it up to the audience members.
I do just have one correction. It was stated that this is the first time ever that the city has used eminent domain, and that is not correct. Richland Avenue South was an example of having to take parcels for that improvement. So.
Okay, thank you for the correction.
I think the explanation, though, was or maybe what Member Spildis was saying was that this is the first time we've taken an entire parcel.
Yeah, yes.
Was that what you were?
That's correct.
Small pieces on Richland
Those were
Avenue.
small pieces.
Yeah. Okay, and I know that we have at least 2 persons who would like to have 3 minutes apiece. Whichever of you would like to come first.
Joan Kornansky, 56 Mount Street. I'm here to address the very issue that has been presented to council. The issues that have been presented to council as a justification for extending Herald Road to West State Street and therefore requiring the taking of a residential property on West State Street as is stated in the proposal. I realize this is circulous language going on. It's only about money, but the money is about taking the property. I'm asking council members to table this proposal because the justifications for the Herald Road extension can be easily nullified. Health and safety and emergency access. 2 emergency provider outfits along with Oblenis Hospital and its emergency room, Ohio Health Urgent Care are already within minutes of West State Street. We are so fortunate to have that on the west side. Emergency access. The bike path from West Union to the lower end of West State Park offers excellent access to emergency responders at the far end of West State Street. It may seem odd that I would recommend that, but I have been told that at the end of ball games, some of the people in their vehicles take the shortcut out the bike path to West Union Street. So we know that it is accessible, and I've walked it many times, and it's definitely wide enough for police cars and emergency vehicles. And there are a few other avenues, but I'm limited on time. The next issue is traffic congestion. And traffic congestion needs to recognize the situation on West Union and also West State and Schaefer. Remember, Little League activities last 2 months. Is 2 months of heavy traffic on some weeknights and weekends enough to justify the taking to appropriate Herald Road extension? Now, the city did a study in 2019 on one day during peak hours and determined that 88 single-use trucks, buses, and semi-trucks cross the intersection of West State and Schaefer. I feel confident that most of those vehicles were city vehicles coming and going from the city facilities on West State Street. Over the years, because it has been going on for years, the West Side Community Association has recommended to the city that those city vehicles utilize the back gate of the West State Street city facilities to cut into Herald as an alternative means of cutting down the traffic load on West State Street and Schaefer.
And Joni, you are at 3 minutes, so if you could
Oh, quickly.
summarize.
The city has never responded to this as an alternative means for another access. If the Herald Street cut-through brings more traffic to West Union Street at the Larry's Doghouse intersection, turning lanes may not make it better but not perfect, rather better but still problematic, which means the traffic problems at the intersection would be unchanged, and we've spent taxpayers' money, which the ARC money is, taxpayers' money, and altered people's lives with no positive outcome. Third item, economic development, which was not discussed tonight. And I don't know what the economic development projects that are projected for the West State Street Herald Avenue area are. I would assume they're spelled out in the ARC grant, which I have not seen. But you have to ask yourself, what type of development would benefit from a minimal 2-lane curvy road that would not be better positioned on Columbus Road or East State Street, both streets with optimum access? Thank you.
Thanks.
Paul Wiley, Mary Street. I attended the February 25th meeting 2020 for this development of this. I was actually in opposition of it. I wrote some commentaries down on that. Basically saying in general I'm opposed to the opening. I recognize that there's the building of major medical facilities, OU at Ohio Health, will further congest Schaefer and Union intersection and need to open the Herald Beltway to reduce that congestion. My worry, of course, is I live on the other end of Central. This is going to turn that whole area into a beltway at that point. What you're going to see is you're going to go down Second, you're going to go towards down Central, then cut to West State. Also, you can avoid the traffic signal on Schaefer and Union. So, my concern, of course, is that we've got a park down there. We have increased speeds. We have, what, 4 or is it 5 speed bumps in the parking in the park there, West State Street Park, because, of course, people go too fast. This is not going to slow anybody down. If you look at the commentary, most of it says, well, I can get there faster. It's taking too long to get in and out. So I have every expectation it'll have 25-mile speed limits, just like East State Street, which, of course, I think one of the replies was, well, we'll tell the police about it in the commentary. If I look at the commentary I have, it said, I expect the opening to increase traffic through 2nd, Central, and West State Street corridor, reducing traffic flow through Slaughter, Rear, and Street cut-through. The response to that says, thank you for your comments. The traffic flow cannot be modeled. It is anticipated the route to the uptown area will remain West Union Street. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about a beltway, the West Side Beltway. And until you build one, whether it's Armitage or a bridge across Hocking there, we're going to just get more traffic on it. We're going to have faster traffic. And then we're going to put it 15 feet away from somebody's house. That sounds very useful, I'm sure. I look at you, all of you, and just look at your property. Go home tonight and look at your property and say, well, what happens if somebody showed up at your door and said, we're going to take part of your property here? I mean, you know, it sounds like something out of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. We're going to do a bypass and just take it out. But at the same time, I don't see this as something favorable or even worse, the taking of somebody's property. I asked how old this person is, 60 years old. Go ahead, tear yourself up. Take your property away from somebody at 60 years old. What they had, they lived on, they lived there, and because we need a bypass on this thing, some kind of beltway, I don't know. So in general, I'm opposed to it. That's probably why it didn't happen in my administration. But you know, I sat on Bobcat Lane for a long time too. So, you know, I don't expect you to say I love roads, but at the same time, I don't see this as a positive thing. Essentially what you're seeing is the West State Street Park is overused. It's overpaved, it's in a well-field area. We spent $1 million in remediation and penalties to fix that well-field area. That's the 2nd largest well-field we have. And we're just about ready to put a bunch of trucks through it and cars through it. That's all I'm going to do. Thank you.
Thank you.
Go home, look at your property. Take 40% of it all.
Any other comments from our audience members? All right. Okay, we have a motion
I have
and
one last
second for
question.
approval, yes.
The mayor made a very good point about returning money. This is a question. A proposed cut-through Herald Street is not the entire project. Is that correct? A proposed Herald Street cut-through is not the entire project, is it?
It's not the entire West Union Street improvements
No, no.
project. It's one
So,
portion of it.
so we could still go ahead with the improvements on West Union Street using the money, the tax dollars that someone mentioned that have been returned to Athens from ODOT and ARC, and improve West Union Street and not do this part of it. Let me say that again. We could still do the proposed improvements on West Union Street and make that a much safer, more attractive area and address whatever concerns currently exist in that area and not do Herald Avenue.
Okay, thank you. So what I'm going to do is ask for a raising, Mayor Patterson, and then we are going to take the vote.
I'll be real brief. And it's just a point of clarification. ARC access road is to build a new road. And so therefore, it is only for the Herald Drive connector. It's not, it can't be taken from that and put towards West Union or anything else. The ODOT grant, that's West Union.
Thank you. And yes, I'm ready to move towards the vote on it. All right. And I would like people to raise their hands. So those in favor of the motion to approve Resolution 122, would you raise your hands, please? So 1, 2, we have 3. 3 in favor. And those opposed? 4 opposed. So the motion fails. And that's it for that resolution. Thank you so much for listening to us amidst the discussion. Okay. We'll move on to announcements and other business, and we will have the committee meeting next week. We will also have the special session next week, so that we can be considering, among other things, the mask ordinance before the deadline of the February 28th end date of the current one. And if council members do have items, make sure that you've been in contact with clerk of council, also administration, if you have committee items, to get them to clerk of council Debbie Walker by Wednesday, please, so that we can get the announcement out in time. We have 3 items for other short items for business, and then we'll be finished. One is the motion to accept the January 22 financial reports. If I could have a motion for approving these.
So moved.
Moved by Councilmember Ziff and seconded by?
Second?
Second by Councilmember Swank. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And we have a motion to accept the January 2022 credit card transactions.
So moved.
Okay, Councilmember Ziff. And a second from
Second.
Councilmember Grace. I know, we're all tired. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All right, and now the last motion is for confirmation of the mayor's appointment to the Shade Tree Commission. And Councilmember Grace.
Yes, I would like to make a motion that we approve the mayor's appointment of Catherine Ziff to the city's Shade Tree Commission and thank her for her service.
Okay.
Second.
Okay, thank you. A second from Councilmember Reisner, and this is as an alternate position. And all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And we do have one abstention. Councilmember Ziff. Okay, thank you. All right, and we now have an opportunity for citizens to speak on legislative items and city services that are not covered on the agenda. So anything that hasn't been spoken to about tonight. Yes, Jordan. You have up to 3 minutes.
Hi, Jordan Hazel, 61 Franklin. I would like for council to pass a resolution opposing the Ohio House Bill 454, which basically outlaws gender-affirming care for transgender youth in Ohio and forces nurses, counselors, and teachers and school workers to out their transgender children to their parents, which actively endangers them. I think this is a discriminatory and terrible bill that is basically jumping on the bandwagon of a lot of other states who are actively discriminating and trying to make the country an unsafe place to live for transgender people. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Is there anybody else? Yes, Paul Weil.
Well, Mr. Mary Street, thank you for the discussion. Thank you for your work. Happy President's Day.
All right. And I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Seconded.
And seconded by the Ziff and McCary. And all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? I hope no one. It's 9:26, and we will see you next Monday night. Thank you.